This is Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.
Well, welcome back to another edition of Inside the News. Glad that you are with us, and we've got a lot of hot topics, so let's get right to it. John Kelly, General John Kelly, is now replaced as Chief of Staff. He replaced Reince Priebus, and within his first hours, he's already released Anthony Scaramucci. Frank, go for it.
Well, General Kelly is probably one of the toughest characters we've seen in this job, and he certainly is no lightweight. A lifetime career in the United States Marines, and by the way, a Gold Star father. He lost his son, who was fighting for his country in Afghanistan. Certainly he's a man who sacrificed a great deal for his country, both in his career and his personal relationships. I think he's going to bring a different type of perspective to the White House in that particular job. Because of his military background, because of the losses he suffered, I think he has a perspective on what's good for the United States, what's good for the administration, that no one else probably could have in that position at all. It's really interesting to note how the president continues to rely on folks without the same type of political background you might expect from other presidents. This is going to be interesting. I also think that General Kelly's distinguished background and his family sacrifices are going to have to go a long way towards keeping the press in check about unwarranted criticism of the guy. He's very similar to President Trump, I think, in that the more you criticize him, the stronger he gets.
You know what, Ben? People are criticizing Trump because he's replacing people, and I kind of applaud him in the fact that if he understands it's not working, he's not afraid to change it just to make it work, and he's got the courage enough to do that, Ben.
Well, he does, and we've said it many times before. Donald Trump brings the attitude and experience of a CEO in the private sector. He doesn't brook dissent, and he is quick to pull the trigger when it comes to making changes, very similar to reality in the private sector. So I applaud the president for bringing John Kelly into the role. I am tempted to say that we now have adult supervision in the White House, which I think is the feeling a lot of people have. And I do believe that John Kelly's skills were being underutilized while he was the head of Homeland Security. It's an important role, but Kelly brings so much more to the table in his experiences. He has a very distinguished military career with very senior commands across a broad spectrum, from roles at NATO to head of the Southern Command for the U.S. military. So he is a no-nonsense type of guy, and he does bring the discipline that is obviously needed in this White House. Now, I suspect there were two key stipulations that John Kelly had for President Trump before accepting the role as Chief of Staff. One was a free hand to make the changes he felt necessary, and you saw that in his first high-profile move in getting rid of Scaramucci. And I am sure that the next was a very honest discussion around the president's message discipline or lack thereof, some of the tweets he does. Now, this time will tell how this plays out, but I will note that since Kelly became Chief of Staff, the president's tweeting has seemed calmer to me. It has been a little more thoughtful. His noted tweet yesterday was "Great day at the White House," which is a pretty innocuous tweet compared to some of the things that the president sends out there. So we'll see how this works. But we all know that the president has shot himself in the foot more than once when it comes to his undisciplined messaging. On the one hand, it's a two-edged sword. Yes, he has the ability to communicate directly with people, with the common voter out there. He has an uncanny ability to connect to voters, and that has served him well. It's taken him into the White House and will be necessary if he's going to be reelected. On the other hand, he has done some things that has hurt his cause and hurt his agenda. So we'll see how it develops.
Frank, this president, and he has kind of drifted more and more toward the military. And he's got a deep respect for the military. And to have a 4-star general in that position, and I agree with Ben that I believe that there are some stipulations also that anybody that goes to Trump has to go through Kelly. And I believe that was part of the stipulation as well, Frank.
Good observations. I think that Donald Trump appropriately has a disdain for typical political Washington. Of course, he came up with the concept of the swamp and draining that swamp, in which he includes most Washington politicians. But he does have a great respect for the military. After all the government agencies have not served the United States particularly well, but the military has never failed us, and I think that's why Donald Trump feels that he can rely on them. Conversely, I believe it's only folks with a distinguished career in the military, like General Kelly, who had the ability to talk back to Donald Trump. I think that Donald Trump doesn't particularly like criticism from his own staff, but I think if he respects the person who's doing the criticism, and I think that's General Kelly to a T, I think that criticism will fall not on deaf ears, but on someone who really will understand, take it in, and internalize it. So I think you're going to see a lot more discipline from the White House. You're going to see President Trump continue to tweet. It's a central part of his persona. He wants to get away from having to use the press as a filter between himself and the American people, but he has to do it in a more intelligent manner, a more thoughtful manner, and I think General Kelly can instill that discipline in him.
You know, Frank, just to dovetail on that before we go back to Ben, I believe the military, they can disagree with Donald Trump and they can say we disagree and this is why, but because of their military background, they do it in a much more respectful way and knowing that he's commander-in-chief.
And I think to them it's going to be a bit of relief that they actually have a commander-in-chief who listens to them. Let's be very blunt. During the Obama years and during the Clinton presidency, the military didn't really have a welcoming environment in the White House. We recall in the first weeks of the Clinton administration when Hillary Clinton famously said, I don't want uniforms in the White House. And, of course, the utter disdain that the Obama administration had for the military was legendary. So I think it's going to be a relief that the military has a welcoming environment in the White House, and I think they will, in turn, get a great deal of respect from this president.
Okay, Ben, we brought this up maybe a month ago on our program that we were going to dog the leaking and the people who are doing the unmasking. And then just within the last few days or so, we found out about this Awan family with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Ben.
Well, this is an emerging scandal of tremendous proportions. The news has been breaking fast and furious over the last week. We have a family of Pakistanis, 3 brothers in particular, who came to America and provided IT services initially to Debbie Wasserman Schultz as early as 2005. But they spread their services throughout a large portion of the Democratic representatives in the House. Over 80 representatives use this family. And as we learn more and more, we are hearing a lot of things that are very disturbing, and I think we are just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's going to emerge with this family. The family was formally banned from gaining access to the IT network of the House of Representatives in February of this year, when investigations revealed that information was, quote, being siphoned off to off-site servers. And what that means and how far that goes, one can only speculate. But obviously, that suggests that information that these gentlemen had access to, this family had access to, which was all of this, the sensitive email traffic and documents on the computers of many high-ranking Democrats, starting with the most high-ranking Democrat, who was Debbie Wasserman Schultz. All of this information may have been siphoned off and sent to third parties, i.e., one can only speculate, the Pakistani ISI or their CIA, their intelligence agency, and who knows what else. But the more we learn about the family, it is very dubious as to their character, their reputation. The senior brother declared bankruptcy in 2012, despite the fact that the family received over $4 million in taxpayer money. All of the brothers were making at least $160,000 a year in payments. There are allegations of absentee family members who are also making that type of salary per year to provide IT services. There's all sorts of dubious history with this family. The senior brother was arrested trying to leave the country and get back to Pakistan about 5 days ago. He was arrested on bank fraud charges. But this is the start of a big investigation. A couple of interesting facts. One, Imran Awan, who is the 36-year-old senior brother and the leader of the family, if you will, hired an attorney, Chris Gowan, who is very expensive. I would guess his rates are between $600 and $1,000 an hour. He is very connected to the Clintons. And you have to say, well, why is a very senior Washington attorney who is a longtime Clinton fan, this is the guy, the attorney who actually was the fact checker for Bill Clinton's personal memoir, My Life. That's how connected he is. And I started to investigate, and I found pictures of Imran Awan palling around with Bill Clinton himself. So this is going to have a lot of tentacles. Another interesting fact is that Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother, Stephen Wasserman, is the assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, and ostensibly is the one right now in charge of this investigation. So if ever there was a reason for special counsel to be named, I think this is it right here.
I'm going to go back to Frank, but just a quick question back to you, Ben. Would they have wanted to get with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is then part of the head of the DNC? Terrorism takes many forms, and this can be another form of terrorism, too, with blackmail, with hacking and all. But would Wasserman Schultz be given credibility? Was that maybe how we got the other 80 representatives on board with that?
Well, if you were going to infiltrate the Democratic Party and gain access to sensitive material, no better way than to go through Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah.
She kept the brother on the payroll until the day he was arrested, despite the family being banned and being under investigation. She notably in May threatened the Capitol Hill police that seized Imran Awan's laptop. She threatened them publicly, and this is not obliquely threatening. It was a very direct threat to punish them if they did not return his laptop, which was seized as part of a criminal investigation. There is a lot going on here. There's allegations of spying, blackmail, absentee workers, and potential kickbacks. You know, one of the oldest forms of corruption exists in this country is putting absentee workers on the payroll, and the company that sets it up sharing that money or kicking that money back to the politicians who approve that type of contract. So there's all sorts of things where this could lead. We are just starting to learn the facts, but this is potentially one of the biggest scandals ever to hit Washington.
Okay, Frank, your take.
Well, Ben outlined the legal aspects of it very expertly, but let me go into three policy areas that this raises questions in. Number one, were there no Americans capable of doing that job that the DNC had to go to Pakistan or to a Pakistani immigrant family to take care of it? So much for the Democrats' claim that they want to give jobs to Americans. Number two, judgment. Who in their right mind would take something as important and as sensitive as this job that this family had and give it to folks who have, frankly, a questionable background? It seems to call into a lot of question the judgment of the DNC and the people who populate the DNC. Three, it begins to call into question some very interesting aspects of the Obama administration and the DNC under Obama and Clinton. We look in the past, we saw for the past 8 years of the Obama administration a bizarre and still unexplained tilt towards Muslim radicals, whether it's Iran, whether it's the bizarre actions of the Obama administration encouraging the knocking out of Mubarak from Egypt and replacing him with a Muslim Brotherhood leader, We still have no explanation of why that was done. We don't know and still have no explanation. What happened in Libya? Why in heaven's name would we knock out a ruler who was on the same side of the West against the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda and engage in a process that created an environment of chaos that allowed more power to the Brotherhood, to Al-Qaeda, and to Muslim extremists? None of those things have been explained yet. Yet this latest incident begins to focus on the tentacles that Muslim radicals have around the Obama administration and around the DNC. Indeed, if this had happened to a Republican administration rather than a Democrat administration, you'd see headlines in the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC and all the rest about the entanglement, the collusion, if you will, of Muslim radicals within the political party. But you don't see that because these, after all, are Democrats, and they're immune from prosecution and criticism by the major media.
We're going to take up a whole lot more of this in part 3 on our Picking Up the Pieces segment, but we've got a lot more to talk about, especially internationally, in part 2. Frank Vernuccio, the editor-in-chief of the New York Analysis of Policy and Government, the writer and the voice of the syndicated radio feature Minute Report for America. You can find Frank, usagovpolicy.com. Ben Brunson, you can find him at benbrunson.com, amazon.com. He's the author of The False Staff Enigma and Esther Sling. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.